This morning we're going to talk about the Ficus Retusa. In the Western Hemisphere, that means Western Europe, Northern Europe and North America, growing indoor bonsai is very popular among the ordinary enthusiasts. I'm not talking of the great enthusiasts who sculpt and prune very intricate junipers and pines, but the run-of-the-mill hobbyists who have just one or two bonsai in the home and they think that that is their pride and joy. For most people, especially those who are not used to bonsai, bonsai is just about indoor trees. They seldom realize that most of the serious bonsai are outdoor trees, but we should not look down on them because they enjoy their trees. And one of the most successful or easy varieties to grow indoors is the Ficus Retusa. This is a ficus that has small leaves and it's ideally suited for growing indoors because the ficus can stand ordinary room temperatures. They need a room temperature during the winter of about 18 to 20 degrees centigrade, and the minimum can go down to as much as 5 degrees centigrade, and they will perform quite well. As long as you make sure that the soil is always moist, they should live for a very long time. I have a ficus in my own living room, which I've had for about 5 years, and it is absolutely thriving and doing well. Most of the other indoor bonsai, like the Chinese Elm and the pepper trees, Sageretia, they prefer a much cooler room. I'll talk about those species on another occasion, but those species really require temperatures, room temperatures of about no more than say 10 degrees to be absolutely ideal for them. So we will not discuss those varieties on this occasion, but today I'm just going to tell you about the Ficus Retusa, how to care for them and how to prune them. It is now the third week in February, and here in the south of England we're going through a very warm spell. The outside temperature is about 15 degrees, but the room temperatures are normal, and at night time it goes quite cold, so the ficus can't be kept outdoors, so they have to be indoors. In the summer you can keep them outdoors and they will benefit from being kept outside. But generally the ficus can remain indoors all year round, provided you keep the soil watered and you give it plenty of light. And don't keep it just facing the window. Occasionally, once a week or once every fortnight, you should turn it around so that it faces the light alternately. I have several examples of the ficus that we stock on our nursery. This is the smallest size, which is just a simple broom tree, and we have not pruned these since the autumn. So since October and November these were not pruned, and as you can see they've made about 3 inches of growth. This is the simple broom style, and what I'm looking for when I care for these trees is you occasionally get some dead twigs which you just remove. But for simple trees of this nature, they're very cheap and cheerful trees, I just prune them into a ball shape. No more than that. And if you feel adventurous, you could wire it out, and by wiring you can open it out and give it more of a broom shape like that. As you can see, I'm not going to spend time wiring, but you can see by wiring, opening it out, it changes the shape a little bit, but no more than that. I will go through these trees all very quickly. This is another one, and again you see that has gone indoors, and without light the inside branches tend to die. I'm just checking if there are any dead twigs inside. There are none, and these are the long shoots that have grown, so I just go through with ordinary pair of scissors and prune it into a ball shape or broom shape. And if you feel adventurous, you can open it out by a bit of wiring and change the shape a little bit. Then you get the S-shaped tree, the informal upright, And this again, we prune into a triangular shape. Just keep it in a triangular shape and it should be okay. This shoot is growing quite long, so you're in danger of losing the pad, so you need to prune that back. This one, if you feel like you can, with a bit of wire it like this so that you can improve the shape. The ficus don't suffer from many diseases, but I just spotted on a twig that I've just pruned, you do get aphids growing on it. If we bring the camera close, you can see these little insects there. They are white aphids. They suck the sap of the tree, so you got to watch it. So that you can either just rub it off and kill it or spray with insecticide. But if there are just a few of them, you can just squash the insects so that they don't damage the trees. And after pruning, you will notice that the ficus always give out a sap. After all, it belongs to the rubber tree family, and this is the sap that produces the rubber for your tires and rubber for all sorts of goods. So on these big trees like the Ficus elastica, which is the rubber plant, the white sap is tapped for making rubber. They say that the sap can be dangerous for animals, so keep them away from cats and other pets, but I don't think it can harm you if you touch it. So that is the shape we would prune that tree in. A bit of wiring there. This little root is the start of an aerial root. All these ficus, the Ficus Retusa, they send aerial roots. I'll show you some larger ones in a moment. You can encourage these to go into the soil and they will become nice thick aerial roots. While talking about aerial roots, let's move on to the next one. This is another example. Can you see all the aerial roots growing from this one? Lots of aerial roots coming, and a lot of people like them because they make it look nice and complicated and a bit bizarre, if I might say. But this is the nature of the tree. There are some people who don't like the aerial roots, so they prune them all off. But because this is the natural habit of the tree, I would keep the roots. I'm just going to show you how to prune some of these large ones. Let's look at this tree. So this is quite a large tree. I would say it is about 45 centimeter tall, and the trunk is quite substantial. If we turn the tree around, you can look at it all sorts of different sides, and most of the ordinary customers who buy these trees and who are not fussed about the styles of the trees, they won't even know the front from the back of the tree, so they're not bothered. But strictly speaking, all bonsai do have a front and a back. So if we just turn this around, this side is more open, this side less so. There are more branches there, although the aerial roots on this side look very interesting. So you have a choice of either this side, the open side, which the classical way of looking at bonsai is that this should be the front because it's open, and this side, because there are more back branches, this should be the back. But because the aerial roots are so interesting, you could even make this the front. And if you just remove this one and show the aerial roots, this could be the front. But since this is not my tree, and someone who buys this tree may prefer to have the tree looking bushy, I would leave them to make the decision. I'll just show you how I would prune this tree. As I said earlier with the other trees, these have not been pruned since October of last year. So they've grown quite a bit. So the shape has become a bit, ugly. And a lot of these long branches could do with a bit of a trim. So the way I look at these trees is that I always aim for a conical shape. As long as you prune the trees in a conical shape, don't bother about the inside too much at this point. Just make it into a conical shape and you can't go far wrong. Even from this side, you need to make it more conical, and the tips you need to take out. If you don't prune the tips, it'll get longer and longer. So it's very important to look at each of these tips and take the tips out. As I said, this is a nice bushy tree. A lot of people like the bushy trees. So I'm not too bothered. See, this was a pad, but it's going out. You can wire this outward if you wish. But just basic pruning is pruning it into that conical shape, and you have this lovely bushy tree. Of course, this pad here, these shoots are getting too long, so I would take these back. Don't worry about taking all the leaves off. It's not quite spring yet, because by spring and summer you're going to get so many leaves that you'll have to prune it yet again, and if you didn't prune these at this time, it'll get too long and it will merge into the rest of the tree. So these pads, I would take it quite hard back there. I'm doing it because these are the pads and they will merge into the next level of branches. As I said, if you wish, you can wire these outwards to give more definition, but essentially I'm showing you how to prune. And with the prunings, the ficus is one of the easiest plants to propagate from cuttings. So all these bits of twigs that have been pruned, if you just insert them in peat and sand, or just peat, you will get a new plant. I will show you a cutting that we make. This was a cutting made as late as September, and in September we put one of these shoots into this little pot, and here you are. It's growing extremely well. So in a few months, can you see all the roots here? This is a cutting that we made back in September. So you can make no end of cuttings from just taking the shoots that you've pruned and sticking them in soil, and you will get a new plant. So that is that one. I will show you a lot of these so that it reinforces the learning process. The ficus is sometimes referred to as the Strangler Fig, and they call it the Strangler Fig because these aerial roots look as if they can strangle the tree. But there's another reason why they're called Strangler Figs. In the native habitats like in India and Australia, where these ficuses grow wild, these ficuses are propagated by birds when they eat the little fig fruit, and the droppings of the birds get into the trees of another species, and when the little ficuses begin to grow, they soon take over the entire tree and they strangle the parent tree. So they kill the tree on which it has hosted, and that's why it's called the Strangler Fig. I like these aerial roots because they look bizarre and powerful, and there's no point removing it because I think it adds to the beauty and bizarre character of the tree. So what I will just do again is to prune it into the conical shape. I'll make sure the pads don't get too long, otherwise these little twigs which form the pads will merge into the rest of the tree, and the tree will just become a blob and nothing else. So like these ones, I will just prune it back. Although we're in February, which is almost coming towards the end of the winter, throughout the winter this tree has been growing, so we've had a lot of growth. So it's time they were pruned. Pruning and root pruning are two subjects that terrify people who have not done much bonsai. But don't be terrified, because if you don't do it, you lose control of the tree and the tree becomes very untidy. So that's all I would do to this. If you wanted to, you can cut this off, but I'll leave it. Let's cut a little bit of the ends. And these aerial roots are typical of most ficuses, especially the banyan tree, the Ficus bengalinus, which has very large leaves, they produce lots of aerial roots. So this is the character of this tree. Complicated trunk, complicated aerial roots. Now this one again has such a complicated structure. Aerial roots merging with the trunk and this side branch. For the classical bonsai person, they would probably remove this because it's too low. But remember, most of these tropical trees should not always be pruned into a pine shape. Where a lot of these purists go wrong, they tend to prune every single bonsai into the classical pine shape, which is used for these hardy conifer and temperate climate trees. But because tropical trees grow in a different way, they tend to forget that you should try and recreate what you see in nature. That means in nature, if you see ficus growing like this, you should try and emulate what you see in nature and create the images that you see in nature of ficuses. So all I'm doing is pruning this back, because all these extensions here, about, I would say they in inches, they're about like 2-3 inches, have grown in the last 3 months. So I'm just pruning it hard back. It may seem a bit severe, but you've got to do that, otherwise you will lose control of the tree. If you have too many ingrowing branches, you can take them out. So I'm just aiming in this case for a dome shape. And again, this has grown a bit too long. Okay, so look at that, it's about 6 inches long. I'm afraid I can't think in metric because I'm used to the imperial measurement of inches. American viewers will be familiar with inches and feet. Many people say that I look like a hairdresser just cutting away. I have a friend who is a hairdresser, and they've told me that if I gave up bonsai, took up hairdressing, I would earn more money. But I think I enjoy bonsai more. Look at these beautiful aerial roots there. So this brings out the real true nature of the ficus. So these are nice features for a ficus. And if this tree got bigger, you can then separate the branches. But since it's not such a large tree, I would say it's only about 35 to 40 centimeter tall, I wouldn't bother to separate the branches just yet. With trees like this, it's hard to decide which is the front and which is the back. As long as you enjoy the look of the tree, that's all that is important. If I were to be highly critical, I would say I could take this branch off because it's hiding the aerial roots. Let's see if I take it off, what would happen. By the way, that would make a beautiful cutting. Let's remove that. And you can see more of the trunk. So there's a case for doing that. So you could use this as a front, but if you're keeping it in the room, you need to turn it around so that it faces the light from different directions. So this tree is nice from any side, this side or the other side. So this is what I've done for pruning this one. I brought this tree along because it has a lot of yellow leaves. People who are not familiar with indoor plants, especially the ficus and even the Chinese elm, whenever they see yellow leaves, they think the tree is dying, but this is not so. There are quite a few species of ficus that do lose the leaves. In fact, some of them lose all the leaves in the winter. I've seen ficuses in the tropics, places like India and Taiwan, where the ficus are completely bare. And in fact, in some of the bonsai exhibitions, they defoliate all the ficuses so that they are displayed in exhibitions without any foliage on at all. So they do defoliate. So ficuses, especially in the winter, before the new leaves come, they shed their old leaves. So if you see yellowing leaves like this, of course, it could be due to two reasons. If you forgot to water the tree or don't water it for a long period, the tree would gradually get yellow and could even die. But if you kept it well watered, in the winter, just before the spring and before the new leaves emerge, you will get the old leaves falling off. So yellowing of the leaves of ficus is not a sign of the tree dying. It's just that it's going through the transition period before the new leaves emerge, so the old leaves will drop off. But I'm just taking the opportunity of pruning all the ends so that the extensions don't merge into the rest of the tree. See, this is a bit of pad, it's grown very long, I can take that back. So a lot of these extensions should be tipped, so I'm just pruning the tips. See, this has grown very long in there, so I'll take that right back there. All these can be made into cuttings, so we'll be making cuttings from these branches. And by pruning these shoots, I will encourage more shoots to grow. It's now the third week in February, and by March, in another month, it will be growing very strongly, and next month I will start feeding the tree with any high nitrogen fertilizer, and it will produce no end of shoots. Again, beautiful aerial roots. Some people who are fastidious will take out the roots and make them grow vertically. This root has grown sideways, so when you are repotting, you can probably pull this root out. I'll just show you what we do. In Europe, where we grow these ficuses, we tend to use more of a peat base or cocoa base compost. We don't try and use too much of the Japanese soils like Akadama. So a peat based soil tends to be better. So you can rearrange the roots so that they, and then you can also plat the roots like that. If you want to, you can do that. And the roots can grow thicker. And then I would replant this tree with the roots growing like that. So you can always do interesting things to the ficuses to make them look more attractive. So this is what I've done to this tree. And now I've got one more tree to show you. This tree has been a bit neglected. When these were imported from the tropics, it must have been growing with the back against the wall, so this side has become a bit bare. Again, if you want to improve this tree, you can do a bit of wiring to straighten these branches out. I'll just show you on one so that you know what I'm talking about. Try not to keep the wire on the ficuses for too long, because they will mark the branches and cause scarring, because ficuses grow very fast. I'm using 2.5mm wire, and assuming you use the right real wire, you can open it out like this. So I'm trying to make the tree a larger conical shape. And then again, basic pruning is taking the tips out. And I've just noticed that on this ficus, I told you the ficus belongs to the fig family, and these little buds here are the dormant fruit of the ficus. If I left it, they would produce little fruit which are about 1/4 inch in diameter, and this is what the birds eat. So ficuses do fruit. The flowers are insignificant, but the fruit are quite interesting, and there are quite a few different species of ficus which have red colored fruit, which make them even more attractive. Now this tree has lost the conical shape a bit because some of these branches have grown a bit tall, but rather than prune it, there's a case for wiring them out, because these have been commercially grown and the people who grew them probably just let it grow as a bush. But if you want to be more creative, you can make the tree have more structure. So I can see that these two branches have grown straight up and they're crying out to be wired more horizontally. So let me get another piece of wire and just wire those two branches. Although most people don't do much to their indoor bonsai, there is scope for being more creative with these trees, especially the larger specimens. Of course, in tropical countries like India, Thailand, Indonesia, most of the bonsai are the tropical ficuses, and they produce some really beautiful specimens with ficus. Now this branch I would take up or encourage to grow up that way to produce the conical shape. Now let me just look at the other side. Now this ground has grown very long, so I'm taking as much as this off, so that would make a lovely cutting there. Lots of dormant fruit I noticed on this. This pad has become a bit high. It's very tempting to leave a bushy tree like this because it has so many leaves, it looks very nice. But if you just left it, you will lose the shape completely. So you've got to be a bit brutal come the spring. Can you see I've just created a pad there? I know I won't be able to sell it for another 2 months, but I've improved the shape, and by the summer it'll look very nice. See, these branches, I don't want to make it too bushy. I can take them out. So although this branch is coming out this way, I can still use this as our front. If you didn't like it, you can remove that branch completely. Now this is not a nice feature. Just notice that this root has gone right round the trunk, and ficuses tend to do that. If you're not careful, they can strangle the whole tree. So what I would do, I would try and get some of those roots out. And this one has gone right round. See, that tree has wrapped the root round this way. These arrow roots are okay, but I don't know why this has done that. It's gone around and strangled the tree there. I will probably cut it out. I don't need that. So basic conical shape for this tree. is all we need. Lovely spreading ficus. Some people may say that this is an ugly root, but again, as I said, this is the nature of the ficus. So I will keep it because it gives character to the tree. And this is what we call a natural looking tree. So anything that resembles trees in nature will make it more attractive as bonsai. So I reinforce what I said earlier. Don't always attempt to recreate your ficuses in the shape of pines and other temperate climate trees, because ficuses are tropical trees and they have this particular character. So this is the last of the ficuses that I've done, and I hope you won't be intimidated. So pruning is the secret to keeping the ficuses in good shape. And come the spring, so throughout the spring and summer, I usually feed the ficuses from March to August or September. I just put a high nitrogen feed and it will produce a lot of lovely green leaves. And throughout the summer you need to keep it pruned. Watch out for scale insect, because ficuses do attract scale. So if you see scale, you can spray it with insecticide or just squash it, but they will give you lots of pleasure. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video about how to care for your indoor ficus. Thank you.